My name is Johan Potgieter. My friends call me Joe. I am a dual South African and Australian citizen. I was born in 1973 in Pretoria, South Africa. I currently live in Brisbane, Australia. I was born with a genetic defect called osteogenesis imperfecta, OI for short, or more commonly called brittle bones. I was lucky because I had my first fracture at the age of 19 months. After this, I had another 120 to 140 breaks until the age of 11 or 12. At this time, it slowed down dramatically, and I would say I probably had 8 or 9 fractures up to my 18th birthday. As you can imagine, I spend a lot of time in bed, in traction or otherwise immobilized. Luckily, the body is very resilient, and I healed from fractures quickly, normally within 4 to 6 weeks. Despite all that time I spent in bed, I could still go to school often enough, and I somehow managed to scrape by each year and never repeated a year. My mother, Anne, also suffers from disorder, and so does my sister, Liesel, because it is inherited. Therefore, there's always a 50% chance of passing it on to your offspring. My mother has this disease, and so did her father. In her father's family, there are multiple people who have this disorder. My father was also disabled and suffered from cerebral palsy. Despite my dad being a brilliant man, he suffered to get a good working position. He was a night watchman and a fingerprint clerk when I was a young child. My mother worked on a switchboard or did clerical and administrative work. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, disabled people were not seen in the same light as today. Both I and my parents had many similar encounters where people would assume that because we're in a wheelchair that we are also brain damaged in some way, or that we are unable to make decisions for ourselves. I believe it started changing in the 1990s, and I could see it in the fact that my dad could move up in companies and people would see his value, not just his disability. Despite being poor financially, I had a wonderful childhood. My parents would never turn our friends away, and we would always have people over. The house would always be filled with fun, laughter, and joy, and I couldn't imagine having a better childhood than the one I had, despite my many difficulties. Oh, I, of course. My parents, both disabled, were well equipped to instruct us on what we needed to know to make it in this world. What they taught us would not make it into a Disney movie, but the reality was that we had to be better than the rest, just to be judged as equals. We were brought up in a world that wasn't made for us. A few examples. A person that walks doesn't even think about stairs. They just walk up and walk down it without thinking twice. But when you are in a wheelchair, you have to consider these things. A high counter where you have to stand to see the person on the other side may not seem like a big problem, but when you are in a wheelchair, you cannot be seen by someone sitting behind this counter. They taught us to stand up for ourselves and to advocate for ourselves. Many other little things they taught us prepared us to be successful in this world. My sister has been a high school teacher for 25 years, and I have been a computer programmer for 20. She is married with 3 children. I married in 1999, and I have 2 daughters. They are 18 and 23 now. My marriage ended about 10 years ago. The horrible part about OI is that it is different for each person. To give you an example, my mother has had one fracture since her 12th birthday, when she was 43 years old, and that is the only fracture she's had since that time. She's generally healthy and has no aches or pains. Now that she is in her 70s, she has mild arthritis in her fingers, but other than that, she has had no major problems from OI, although she is in a wheelchair and hasn't ever walked in her life. Another family member of ours that also has OI, she is 4 foot tall and has walked through her entire life despite having OI. She has constantly broken arms, legs, ribs every second or so year throughout her adult life, but she continued to walk. Now that she's getting older, she's having a lot of problems. She currently has a break in her arm that has not healed for more than 2 years. Despite the fact that she seemed to be stronger because she was able to walk and recover from breaks easily, she is not doing extremely well in her older age. She is bedridden most of the time, despite the fact that she is only 65 years old, at an age when most people get a second lease on life and should be enjoying their retirement. My situation has also worsened over time. When I was a young man, I could easily take my parents' advice and go to work despite the fact that I had aches and pains. Now that I am almost 50, I have more severe pain and it's not easy to get up and just get on with it anymore. I realized a year ago that I needed to find another way of making money that would involve having the freedom to work when I feel up to it and when I can. I could no longer fit into a 9 to 5 job paradigm. I had savings, no debt, and an old reliable car. Unfortunately, very few things turn out the way that you plan. My savings got chewed up much faster than I anticipated, and my car needed repairs every now and then. I also had to take in my 94-year-old grandmother and 74-year-old mother. Now my trusty old vehicle cannot be repaired economically. Without a vehicle, I lose my independence and am constantly struggling to get basic necessities like bread and milk. The closest shop is more than 2 kilometers away. I'm trying to raise 13,000 Australian dollars to buy a 2013 to 2015 vehicle that I can have my wheelchair hoist installed onto. I believe I will be able to find something reliable in that price range. If you have a few dollars to donate, I would appreciate it. Thank you. More information can be found in the description below. I would like to add a note about my physical decline. My arms have always been strong and not brittle like my legs. I have had 7 or 8 arm/shoulder fractures, but that number pales in comparison to the 120 to 140 leg fractures. Despite attempts to strengthen my arms, they have become weaker and have given away on multiple occasions. I have consulted a GP, an orthopedic surgeon, a physiotherapist, and even an exercise physiologist, and no one has been able to diagnose why my arms are doing this. I fear they will give way at the wrong time and I could be seriously injured. I have also lost a lot of weight, about 10 kilograms in the last year, which has also helped. In the past 10 years, other areas have also become more problematic. I constantly injure my ribs while sleeping. They sometimes break and other times just serious bruising. This affects you whenever you are sitting up. Breathing is difficult and painful. I've bought a mattress with a lot of padding, added 2 mattress toppers, and now it is much better, but I still injure my ribs a few times a year, but not as dramatic as before.